Hi, I'm Bella, the biggest fitness enthusiast you'll ever meet. Even now, as I'm recording this video for you, I'm pedaling. Do you want to know what I did to make my body look like this? Then let me start at the beginning. My family wasn't rich. My parents had started a construction business, but so far it had only been losing money. And I needed money to go to college to become a veterinarian. So, in the evenings, I scrubbed the floors in a fitness club and I worked out there after hours. One day, everything was going as usual. I was running on a treadmill when the lights suddenly went off. The treadmill stopped and I crashed to the floor. Someone cursed in the dark. The light turned back on and I saw a disgruntled guy in an electrician's uniform. "What are you doing here? I have work to do." I started to mumble something, but the guy wasn't listening to me. He was instead looking at my figure with interest. And then, to my surprise, he suggested, "You look great. Can you train me? I'll pay you." I thought about it, and I agreed. The guy's name turned out to be Paul. We started to work out together after the club closed, and we trained hard. But one day, after one of our workouts, I was going back home and I saw a kitten cornered by dogs. As a future veterinarian and animal advocate, I could not just walk by. So I rushed to help the defenseless creature. I drove the dogs away and I examined the frightened cat. Its ear was torn and it was shaking all over. I grabbed it and I rushed it to the nearest veterinary clinic. They treated him there, gave him some sedatives, and put a Band-Aid over his ear. I was so glad that I had managed to help that poor creature. But then the door suddenly opened and a guy ran into the clinic. He immediately rushed to the front desk. "I'm sorry, miss. Has a kitten been brought in by any chance? Black, with a white belly?" I walked up to him. "You need to keep a better eye on your pets." That terrified guy said that Felix, that was the kitten's name, had escaped from his carrier while he'd been carrying him home. When he saw the bandaged ear of his pet, he almost burst out crying. He grabbed Felix and clutched him to his chest. When he found out that I had saved him from a bunch of dogs, he hugged me too. We left the veterinary clinic together. The guy said his name was Nick, and we started discussing the lucky rescue of the kitten. We had a lot in common. We both loved animals. I was going to become a veterinarian, and he an ecologist. 2 months flew by that way. I kept training Paul in the evenings, and during that time, he'd lost weight and gained muscle. He was very pleased with the result. We had always met in secret. He asked me to move our workout session to the afternoon, when the gym was actually open. There were a lot of people there, but I needed the money, so I agreed. Paul picked up the dumbbells. I started to urge him on, just as usual. Come on, come on. You don't want to be a shapeless donut like you used to be." Paul got a second wind. I smiled smugly, but all of a sudden, trainer Jess appeared in front of me and hissed, "What are you doing? How dare you talk to the owner of the club that way?" The owner? I looked at the electrician in surprise. Paul had no choice but to tell me the truth after that. He had put on a whole show to find himself a normal trainer. Professionals were always afraid to tell him that he was doing something wrong and only took his money. It never brought him any results. So he had pretended to be an electrician and turned to me for help. After all, I was the only one in the club who didn't know who he really was. I was angry though. Paul had been tricking me for 2 whole months. I turned around and I headed for the exit. But Paul caught up to me. "I'll pay you as much as you want. Just stay. You have real talent." I thought about it. I'd already gotten enough for veterinary college by then. But I'd also gotten ambitious. Over the past couple of months, I had turned this plump owner of a club into almost a real athlete. Was I really about to quit now? So I agreed to stay. I ran home to share the news about becoming a personal trainer of a cool guy with my parents, when I suddenly saw a banner with an ad for an animal shelter. Felix was in the photo. I recognized him by that same torn ear. I was shaking with anger. Why did Nick take in the kitten if he was just gonna abandon him anyway? The next day, I came to the shelter to visit the fluffy guy I'd saved. Oddly enough, Felix had settled in pretty well. He had a full bowl of food, water, and toys. But not all of the animals had it so good. Skinny cats and dogs were looking at me with hungry eyes from beyond the cages. I felt so sorry for them. I pounced on the first employee I saw. What was this mess? The girl looked upset and said that the shelter had no money. Every day they were taking in more and more animals, but there simply wasn't enough money to feed everyone there. I felt devastated. I brought home Felix to help the shelter at least a little. I thought my parents wouldn't be able to resist once they saw the handsome guy, and they'd allow him to stay. I could not have been more wrong. My parents got terribly angry and told me to immediately return the animal to the shelter. They stood firm no matter how much I tried to convince them. Crying, I left the house with Felix in my arms. I didn't want to part with him again, so I came to work and I prepared a corner in the locker room for Felix. and he started living there. I spent whole days at the fitness club, and I fed the kitten with the money that I'd earned from training Paul. I spent almost my entire salary on the other animals in the shelter, but it still wasn't enough. I even spent the money I'd set aside for the veterinary college. Heck, something had to change. And at that moment, a brilliant idea came to mind. Since the owner of the fitness club was so rich, he could support the shelter and I could keep being his trainer. Paul agreed. Now I could return Felix to the shelter with no worries. After all, he wouldn't need for anything there. I went back to the shelter and I told the good news to that same employee, but she said through tears, "Our building's been bought. They're gonna demolish it and build a shopping center instead. There's nowhere to put the animals, so they're all gonna be put down." Damn it! Why were people so cruel? I simply couldn't let that happen, and I spent the whole night trying to come up with a plan. There was only one way out. In the morning, I plucked up the courage and I asked Paul to buy the building. He admitted that it was too expensive, and even he didn't have that much money. I would have to find another way out, but Jess interrupted me. "Listen, you're really good at this. You've turned our boss into a handsome guy, and so quickly on top of that. Tell us your secret." Jess offered me a ton of money. After all, she would earn more after learning my secret and raising the price of the workout sessions with her. I jumped for joy and I hugged Jess. Without realizing it, she had given me a great hint. Now I knew what to do. At home, I found an old photo of myself and I enlarged it in Photoshop. Then, I recorded a video. I used to look like this. But as you can see, I found a way to get the body I wanted. Do you want to do the same? Then go ahead and send me a message. I posted the video with the hashtag #PerfectBody. The next morning, I was woken up by a flood of notifications. I realized that my plan had worked. Naive fat people had sent me a ton of messages. Everyone wanted to know my secret. And my biggest secret was that there was no secret. I'd been going to the fitness club for years to achieve the results. Paul was no exception. I made him train until he collapsed. But people wanted miracles, and I decided I would give them hope. I set a crazy price for my video lessons, and I promised a cool result in just a couple of months. And it worked. That same day, people started sending me money. Don't think I'm a fraud, though. I started recording video tutorials and sending them out to my subscribers. They would train according to my methods, and we would see what happened. At the time, money was the most important thing. A month later, my perfect body project had become very popular. People spared no expense on my online courses. Paul even liked it so much that he made me the face of his club. During one of those promotions, I agreed I would do something crazy. I put on a tight-fitting top and shorts, and I stood in front of the panoramic window in the fitness club next to the logo of my project. An admiring crowd immediately gathered on the street. Newcomers found out about my course, subscribed, and paid me for it. Those who didn't have enough money signed up for training at our fitness club. I was over the moon. But then, something ruined my mood. I saw Nick, Felix's owner, in the crowd. I ran out and I started berating him in the middle of the street. But he said that I had just misunderstood everything. That day, my parents brought my little sister home from the hospital. She turned out to have a terrible allergy to cats, and I had to take Felix back to the shelter. But I kept taking care of him. I brought him food and toys, and when I had enough money to, I was helping the other animals as well. I realized that I shouldn't have pounced on him like that. In fact, we had common goals. I told Nick about the sad fate of the shelter and my plans to buy the building. He liked my idea and suggested that we visit the animals together. At the shelter, the first thing I decided to do was tell the staff the good news. I'll have enough money saved up soon. I just need a little bit more time. And then, but I didn't get to finish. Bella, it's too late. The new owners are already here. Oh, were they now? I guess I would just have to tell them everything I thought about them to their face. So I clenched my fists and I asked to be brought to those villains. A man and a woman were standing with their backs to me and discussing something animatedly. I screamed, "Leave these animals alone! Hey, do you hear me?" The couple turned around, and I cried out in surprise. Those were my parents. I laughed hysterically. "Mom, Dad, why? What are you doing?" My parents tried to say something, but I didn't listen to them. I grabbed Felix, ran out into the street, and I hailed a taxi. My parents had turned out to be real monsters. I didn't want to live with them anymore. When I got home, I ran into my room and I started packing quickly. A few minutes later, everything I needed was already in my suitcase. My tablet was the only thing missing. I remembered that I'd given it to my parents, and I went into their bedroom. There was an architectural model on their table. That damn shopping mall! I hated it. I hated it. I threw the mock-up off the table and I started trampling all over it. In the end, there was almost nothing left of that cursed building. Let my parents redo their project all over again. I picked up my tablet and I headed for the exit. But then, ow, my foot! I'd accidentally stepped on something sharp and I picked it up from the floor. It was a small doghouse. Looking around, I found dozens of similar parts. Could it be? No, I would have to check everything. There were some documents on the table. I grabbed them and I read at the very top, Project of the Construction of a Modern Shelter for Homeless Animals. Tears rolled down my face. My parents didn't want to harm the animals. They wanted to help them. I was just being stupid. I had to go back to the shelter and explain everything to them. But Mom and Dad beat me to it. From the window, I saw them parking in the yard. I ran outside and I kissed my parents. You're the coolest parents ever! I'm so sorry I thought badly of you.
You were spending all your time in the shelter, and we realized how much those animals must mean to you. So we got a loan, and we bought the building from the people who were going to build a shopping center in its place.
But the most important thing was that my parents had found an investor. He had agreed to invest in the construction of the cool shelter and even keep supporting it. My parents didn't even scold me for destroying their mock-up. It turned out they had several copies of it. And soon the construction began. Mom and Dad let me keep Felix, and Paul allowed for the other animals to stay in his fitness club while the new shelter was getting ready. Nick and I spent whole days there, and we grew very close. After a while, we started dating. I kept filming more and more video tutorials and got more and more subscribers. But there was only one problem left. 2 months had passed since the first people had bought my course. I could imagine what I was in for. They'd all be accusing me of lying. Everyone would find out that there was no secret, and no one would be able to get the body of their dreams. And then, maybe, they would even sue me. But things didn't turn out the way I expected. Just imagine, everyone loved my lessons. They sent me a bunch of before and after photos. Many of them even asked me to launch other courses for advanced athletes. I breathed out a sigh of relief. I hadn't deceived anyone. The exercises had proved to be very effective. And the secret of the #perfectbody is simple. Don't be lazy and work out a lot. Send this video to your friends who adore animals. Let's see how many of us there are.